Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Purpose for Life podcast. I'm your host, Suzanne Roberts. I'm the author of It's Deeper Than That. I'm the founder of Unifying Solutions. I'm the designer of the Polarity System Design and the Great Reconnection. And I am so excited to have here with me today, Qiana Williams. There aren't enough things that I could say about Qiana. We'd have to sit here for the whole half hour to talk about all of who she is. But I will say a few things about Qiana. I have found Qiana to live with incredible integrity, to be a champion for both herself, but for human rights and human beings, has a commitment to really building the potential in people that she influences and helps elevate them. And I will say one thing I did witness while Qiana was the Chief Diversity Officer at Ohio Health. I saw her create an initiative to bring anti-racism and into an organization and shift a culture with a team, but with her vision. And I've never seen anybody else do anything like that before. And that's something that just made me go, I want to be around Qiana Williams.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Qiana, I know that you've recently, was it like a year ago or how long ago was it?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that the other day. Yeah, it was officially a year, like a week ago.
Wow.
Oh, yeah.
When you started out on your own with She Ventures Out. And will you talk about what you went through to build She Ventures Out and to be able to launch it and what made you transition from corporate world to being an entrepreneur?
Yeah. So first of all, thanks for having me on. And it's
You're
always
welcome.
wonderful to be in conversation and space with you, Suzanne. It was just a confluence of a lot of things. And I've had an opportunity to just spend a lot of reflective time over, the last year since I made the decision, just around, oh my gosh, was this the right decision? Like,
Mm.
everything hasn't fallen into place the way that I thought it was going to after the decision, all of that kind of stuff. But, it's funny because, I'm one of those people who is, really connected to God, connected to the universe. And, so I've just been, praying and, kind of deep meditation around kind of the moment or whatever. And the message that just keeps coming back to me over and over and over is absolutely like, you did the right thing. Absolutely, you did the right thing, right? Stepping out is never easy. It's
Mhm.
never without anxiety, all of those types of things. And I think I was expecting like the heavens to open, like just things to be like super. But to get to your specific question, so I spent a great deal of my life in corporate environments, working to just be a really good person, a really good leader, all of those types of things. And with a really clear North Star. I wanted to lead an HR function for a major organization. And so, in every organization that I was in, I was always, like asking, like, what is it going to take to get me there? And, my boss and my boss's boss would always say, do these things. And so I do those things. And in kind of the last organization before I went to OHSU, all of these things were told to me. And so I did all of those things, right? Became, on the high potential list, got promotions, all of that kind of stuff. But when an opportunity came available to be CHRO, that opportunity somehow wasn't presented to me, right? The opportunity somehow disappeared, right? Even though I had done all the things that, everyone said that I needed to do. And so, I could have kind of hung in there and decided that, I was going to wait my turn yet again. But I really felt like it was important for me to step out. So I started taking calls from recruiters, ended up getting a call about moving across the country and, fulfilling that dream. And so I took it and went out there to Portland, Oregon, kind of gangbusters, ready to do the very
Yeah.
thing that you talked about, right? Like shift a culture. And when I got there, initially, and, we've talked about this, right? Initially, there was, a lot of energy, a lot of support, people saying all the right things, right? It's kind of like when that article talks about, office pet to office threat, right? So, initially, everybody was on board. And then, slowly things shifted and, the environment, became challenging, to a degree, toxic. And, that high of, being wanted, being recruited, all of those things transition to, being alone, being challenged at every turn. I remember, being on a call one time where, I was sharing the strategy and somebody asked the question around, what gives you it wasn't authority, but like the expertise to say that should be the HR strategy. And I'm thinking to myself, all these degrees, all these years of experience, right? All of like that's what gives me, the expertise or whatever. But it was constantly that kind of thing. And so, anyways, I give you that background to say, at a point, enough was just enough. And I just said, it's time for me to step out and do something different, take the talents, the abilities, all the things that I have and create something that is going to be resonant, is going to be affirming, is going to speak to all the things that I believe and all the things I speak into other people. Like it's going to be that for me. It's going to be a place where I can show up, be seen, feel like I'm contributing in a way that has meaning, all of those types of things. And that's what led me to decide that I was going to step out on my own.
Thank you for saying that. I was witness to some of what you were talking about in your last position. And I'm wondering how much of that is you being a Black woman going out there and what the pitfalls of being at the level that you were at as a Black woman. And you and I have talked before about how Black women get dismissed, discredited, demonized, and destroyed. And if people aren't ready to have a Black woman leader at the level that you are at, you can get targeted with all those things, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, Suzanne. I mean, I think it's all of those things, right? And, like one of the things I've been reflective over is I think that there are people who have experienced the same things that I experienced, the same things that I articulated, right? But stay, right? And
Right.
I think that there are people who look at me and say, well, what did you expect? Like, this is what Black women experience every single day in organizations. Like, did you think you were going to be different? Did you think that,
Mm-hmm.
somehow, because you were in a place that, kind of presents itself as progressive, that wasn't going to be your experience? And this is something that I've really had to grapple with
Mm-hmm.
because I've spent a lot of my life like wrestling with issues, like personally wrestling with issues around race, but also professionally, right? I spent, a lot of my professional career at the Urban League and just have always just, been about, transformation for Black people. And so, I kept asking myself, like, why did this feel so profound to you, right? Like it wasn't like I had an experience racism at, the organization I was at before that, and that, so on and so forth. And what felt different was that I felt completely alone. Like in other places that I had been, I felt like I had people who I could go to say, um, am I crazy? Like, is this really going on?
Yeah.
Or, and oftentimes, right, I was that place for people. But in this place, like, I didn't feel like I had anyone, right? Like there were people who were close to me who saw what I was experiencing and said nothing, did nothing.
Right.
Didn't even, I remember, my boss at the time saying, yeah, you're doing a great job, hang in there. Right. Like, and, and I think that the other piece of it too, Suzanne, because I mean, like I said, you're absolutely right. Like, Black people in general, Black women in specific, deal with these types of things every single day. And so like it would have been silly for me to feel like I was going to deal with something different. But I think the other piece that made it feel so different was the level of vitriol, the level of attack.
Yeah.
I mean, I had, like an individual who had the power of the pen from a newspaper standpoint, who almost felt like he woke up every single day looking for reasons to attack me. I mean,
To vilify you. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, at the point in time where you're writing an article because I hosted change management training for my team, right? Like when you all have nothing better to write about in the newspaper than a change management training, and nobody feels the need to say, okay, somehow this is out of bounds, somehow this has gone too far, right? Like the fact that we're not like 10 toes down supporting her around a change name. That's when I knew that, something was off. And then I think the final straw was, having, a personal attack leveled against me for failings of, another individual within the institution, right? Like, so that's why I think it was different, right? Like you expect to experience racism, unfortunately, when you are a Black person in corporate America. What I did not expect was the heights that this went to and the lack of support at every level.
Yeah, it's the demonization and the destroying that were heightened.
Exactly.
Along with dismissing and discrediting, but you got all four of them, right? So you got hit at every level. And yeah.
Exactly. I mean, think about the fact that, it goes back to the earlier story. Like I had spent my entire career building a record of success, building a portfolio of being a great leader, a great employee, all of those things. And I was watching somebody like systematically try to destroy that. And there's no getting around that, right? Like I'm one of those people who, is very conscious of like not giving people power and realizing that, people are miserable. It's about them. Like it's not personal on you, so on and so forth. And all of those things are true. But what's also true is that this person was okay with advancing stories that weren't true, like, like shifting stories to, fit a narrative, all of those types of things, right? And nobody felt like they should stand against that. I remember asking one time, I was on a call with, two people who I worked with at the time, and I said, this story went out and nobody challenged it. I said, do you know me to be a person who lacks integrity? Because that's what the story says.
Right.
I said, do you have, like, is that any experience that you've ever had with me?
No.
Right. And so that's the thing, Suzanne.
Well, I'm grateful that you set your own boundary about it when nobody else would. And that's something that I want to acknowledge about you, Qiana, that you have a fight for inside of you. I've seen you fight for so many things, and it feels like this was a great fight for yourself.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's absolutely it.
also, Qiana, I'm really fascinated. I'm just going to ask you this because I've experienced you different than I've experienced most leaders. Like we did something after George Floyd, where you and I did a dialogue for the organization about white supremacy and racism and those kinds of things. And before anything we ever did, you always took a moment to center and pause before. And I had never been with a leader, and this was years ago, that actually brought a sense of mindfulness or brought a sense of reflection into something that we were going into. And you talked about, God and talking to God and listening to God. And then it seems like you've had an inner practice along the way towards tuning into your own inner wisdom or tuning into something deeper inside of you while you've been wildly successful, in the corporate world. And how do you feel like that inner development that you've been paying attention to and your prayer and your faith informs who you are and also maybe informed that decision too?
Yeah. Well, so first of all, I have to say that, I had a colleague who had introduced the pausing, in a team meeting, and it resonated with me so much that, I started doing it as well. But I will say, like you're spot on, because it definitely was the reason why I was able to resonate with it when my colleague did it and then wanted to start doing it is because from a really early age. I remember my mom having us, like listen to or read books by like Marianne Williamson and Michael Bernard Beckwith and,
Hmm.
Wayne Dyer, right? And just this idea, right, of, connecting to, power bigger than myself, but also understanding that I am that power, right? Like, like
Right.
in the Bible where God said, where God talks about, like we are created, in his image, right? And that, so in my mind, right, like what I'm thinking about in that moment, well, what I think about in every moment, right, is how can I show up in a way that honors who God has created me to be,
Yeah.
who affirms that, who affirms the best in me, right? Because, there are times where I miss the mark, there's
Right.
times where I miss the mark as a leader, there's times where I've missed the mark as a mother, as a daughter, all of those things as a colleague. But what I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? And I think this is part of the reason why, that experience was so challenging for me is because I know without a shadow of a doubt that every single day when I attempt to be, right, the way that I'm trying to show up is in a way that affirms other people, right, is a way that allows other people to find their best, to be
Yes.
their best, to connect to their brilliance, right? Whenever I'm in a space one on one or in a group, it is always about how can I ensure that I leave people better than I found them? And I I think for sure that comes from, early experiences around, connecting to spirit, connecting to, who I am spiritually. And, those authors that I talked about do that, reading my Bible does that, all of those things. Um, And I think that the other thing that that does for me is it grounds me in those spaces, right? Because, there was a point I remember talking to, the pastor of the church that I went to when I was in Portland. And I was like, yeah, like, I don't believe, like that this is what God wants for me. Like, this is a very challenging experience. Like, this is like, it's horrible. And, he said, I just want to challenge that. He said, sometimes God does put us in challenging situations. And so I decided, okay, like I'm going to honor that word and I'm going to hang in here, right? I'm going to keep showing up. I'm going to keep doing the things, so on and so forth. But then, Suzanne, something pretty significant happened. And I heard clearly, like, you can go. Yes.
You can go. So you
Yeah.
stayed in the challenge until you got the message. And I think that requires deep listening, because sometimes we cannot get out of the challenging circumstances that we're in, and we're not meant to. And then there's a point when it's clear and it's done.
Yeah.
I do want to say something to you, Qiana, because every interaction that I've ever had with you, you've always had integrity. And
Yeah.
I also trust you to tell me the truth, which produces trust in me. You'll be honest with me and forthright, and I can be back with you. And I find you incredibly trustworthy. And I also want to say I got to hear from so many people that said Qiana is the best leader I've ever had, because she saw the potential in me and she required me. But she saw that if you don't require, people won't rise. And I just want to say that. I do want to ask you a question. I I am not surprised that the Red Sea didn't part for you when you, because that's not like being an entrepreneur. That's not ever been my experience. And yet you're creating a pathway that's going to be sustainable for you over time. And I'm so glad that you have. And I want to ask you a very specific question,
Okay.
because I am, my next book is called The Great Reconnection, Putting Soul in Leadership, because the word soul is not a word that's used with leadership. Right. And yet you have an attunement to your soul, you have had since you were a little kid, both through the readings that your mom gave you and also through church and your faith. But that is a different kind of attunement. Do you think that being an entrepreneur now gives you the freedom to bring your soul through everything you do in a way that's different than when you were in the corporate world?
So honestly, no, because I think this is
Oh,
why
yeah.
my experience was challenging, is because like I won't not be myself. Right. And
Right,
so
right.
in those
Okay.
environments, I was still showing up with my faith. I was still showing up with my soul. Like, I
Okay.
remember there was this moment where a decision was made, and then the decision was reversed. And, so I went before our people, right, and talked through the decision, owned the decision, all of those types of things. And that's my faith at work, right? That's my faith
Okay.
at work to say, like, even if there's a fire, even if there's a challenge, right? Like, I'm going to show up. I'm going to own what I need to own, right? But I'm also not
Mm.
going to shirk from the moment, right?
Right.
Because I trust that I am always going to be caught. And what I mean is, if I fall, I'm going to be caught, right? Like if I
Right, right.
stumble, I'm going to be caught, right? Like all of those types of things. Like God's hand is always going to be on me. And like one of the things I used to say all the time, they're like when things would go wild, is I like everybody is going to see that in the end that God does not play about me. And so like if you are out here like
Yes.
besmirching my name, like in the end, you are going to see that God does not play about me. And and
Mm.
so, but to your question, I can see how there are some people who might feel like I can't, bring my soul. I can't bring my whole self. And I get when people can't do that. But there's just something in me.
Ooh, beautiful.
Yeah, there's just something in me who is like, I have to do it. Like, I just have to bring all of Qiana. And because there was a point, when I was younger where like I was really afraid to bring all of Qiana. Like, everybody always marvels when I say, like, like that I feel like I'm not an extrovert. I certainly wasn't an extrovert as a child. I certainly felt like the awkward Black girl as the child. I certainly felt like I had to dim the light of Qiana and all of that kind of stuff. And so I work really hard now to just be Qiana, and knowing that some people are going to love it, some people aren't.
Right.
But what no one is ever going to be able to say is that me being Qiana did not create space for you to be Suzanne or for Bob to be Bob, right? Like, there's this quote, and I think I've talked about it before, from Marianne Williamson, where she says, like, when we allow our light to shine, we give other people permission to do the same. I'm all about that.
Awesome. What freedoms do you find being an entrepreneur?
Um, well, certainly the freedom of, determining, what I do when I do it, right? Because, when you're, in a corporate environment, your time is rarely your own, right? Especially when you're in a highly visible position like the one that I was in, where, people demand your time, and, if you don't give it to them, right, then, they may go to the newspaper. So, so I felt
crazy to me. Yeah,
exactly. I still felt, really responsible for being responsive. And, now, I don't have to be as much, right? Like, I get to choose, like, who I work with, when I work with people, so on and so forth. So that's definitely a freedom. What else would I say is a freedom? I mean, the type of work I do, is, there's freedom there, right? I don't necessarily do the breadth and depth of things that I had done, like when I was in a corporate environment. So those are two of the things that I think I feel more freedom in.
And what are you loving the most about what you're doing now? Like, what are you doing? Let's let our listeners know what if they wanted more of you, what could you offer them?
Yeah, so I launched my coaching practice, Be Unapologetically Brilliant.
You
And
just say that again, because that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, so Be Unapologetically Brilliant,
Love that.
which is my coaching practice, where, I'm really focused on people in transition. So transitioning to a new job, transitioning out of an organization, going into the C-suite, going into your first management role, but also transition that happens outside of work, right? So it's transitioning out of a relationship, transitioning across the country for, like, to pursue a new job, whatever, like those types of things. So, transitions can be challenging, and, helping people, kind of work through and manage their transitions is where I feel like I have a sweet spot.
Nice.
Yes.
That's exciting. And what's the title of your book? Because I read the book when you were still at your last job, and I thought, I wonder if she's prepping to leave. I don't know if you meant that to be a bridge, but I loved your book and it's on my bookshelf. But will you share the title of the book?
Sure. So it's The Lie, an Enchanted Revelation. And the subtitle is A Fairy Tale of Finding Your Voice in a Forest of Fables. And, it's funny that you say that, because honestly, I was not thinking of it from the standpoint of transitioning at that point in time, but I was thinking about it from the standpoint of, um, you know, how do I share my story? Which, it's funny because, I wrote a book before that, The Career Roadmap, and both books, now that, like, I didn't think about this until you just said what you just said. but both books were born out, obviously, of personal experience, but they were both at a point in time where I felt like I needed to share something in particular with other people who may be experiencing things. So the career roadmap was about, how do you lead? How do you kind of get unstuck in your career? And it came on the heels of me feeling like I have been stuck and I have been
Hmm.
kind of stagnant when I was trying to excel. And then the lie was born out of a moment in time where I felt like not only had a lie, multiple lies been told about me, but also, which is where the lie came from, but also, it's also a play on the lies that we internalize,
Right.
right? The lie of not being ready, the lie of not being enough, the lie of being too much, the lie of imposter syndrome, all of those things. But I wanted to do it from a different lens because I think a lot of times we say, oh, she has imposter syndrome. All we need to do is just remind her of how talented she is, so on and so forth.
Mm-hmm.
And those things are true. But also, sometimes we tell somebody it's imposter syndrome when it's really this toxic environment or the culture or like those kind of headwinds that are coming at somebody that they really have no control over.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me it was the lie is right, like saying it's imposter syndrome when no, it's racism. No, it's
Right, right.
microaggressions.
Yeah,
Right, like no, it's conscious bias. Right, like that's what
right. No, I really, really appreciate you saying that. I mean, I've worked with other Black women coaching them when they'll tell me something like that and they'll tell me what they're experiencing. I'm like, that's racism. They're like, it is? I'm like, yes, it is. And I really appreciate that distinction between an external force where you're taking hits and you're routing those hits through something that's not accurate. And then you're
Yeah,
reifying it in a way that's not helpful, right?
exactly.
Awesome. That's great. What do you think the purpose for life is, Qiana?
Whew. I mean, I think the purpose in everything is love, Suzanne. Love in every form imaginable, right? So, self love, like love of neighbor, right? Love of the earth, right? Like if in every moment, like I used to call myself the love girl, like because I used to tell people like we got to reach for love in this moment. We got to reach for love in this moment, right? And so truly in every moment, I feel like if we were all pausing and the thing that we were about to say or the thing that we were about to do, if we were to ask ourselves, like, is this thing I'm about to do grounded in love? Is it about extending love? Is it about advancing love? And if we asked ourselves that question and the answer came back no, and then we chose not to do that thing, like we would all be in a much better place. Right. Like, I think that just all too often, like, we are not leaning into love in a way that honors ourselves and then honors the people around us.
That brought tears to my eyes. Thank you for saying that. I mean, I agree, but to hear you and where I think it's not just listening to your words, but it's where it's coming from inside of you and the accountability that you hold yourself to around that, it just is touching me. So just
Thank
being
you.
real in the moment here, got to me here. So thank you. How can people get a hold of you, Qiana? If somebody wants to coach with you.
Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, a few ways, right? Somebody can email directly at Qiana at bebrilliant.coach, COACH. They can find me on our website, bebrilliant.coach. Um, And then, I'm occasionally on social media. So LinkedIn is always the best place to find me from a professional standpoint. Qiana Williams on LinkedIn.
Well, I encourage anybody that's in any kind of transition to reach out to Qiana. You will grow. I promise you that. And thank you so much for being here today on the Purpose for Life podcast. And thank you to all the listeners that have joined us today. And I hope you take away today as much as I have from being with Qiana. So thank you again, Qiana, for being here.
Thank you for having me. This was wonderful.